Hey guys, what's up? This is Uri Peleg, and in this video I'm going to examine when and why we choose to slow play with sets, specifically in position. Now, slow playing means setting the trap. I think it's a very underexplored aspect of poker. And I'm going to start out by looking at the 7-4 deuce two-tone board. And what you'll see immediately is that sets basically never slow play. 2.8% is very reasonably in the round to zero or simulation is not accurate enough area. And you'll see that the sets overlap with the equity bucket of 90 to 100. You know, in poker, our incentive is to build a pot when we have the best hand and to kind of maneuver toward the appropriate pot size with every single hand. And the appropriate pot size for the 90 to 100% equity bucket hands is generally all in. So our basic strategy really wants to revolve around just putting all the money in with these hands, and you would need a very maniacal opponent to ever consider checking these back here. Now, every other equity bucket, even 80 to 90, we can see clearly does have checkbacks, and the hands that exist in the 80 to 90 bucket are hands like pocket aces, or in this case, you know, a7 of hearts, which doesn't check back, but say 7-8 of hearts. So these are extremely strong hands, but they do check back sometimes. And if I were to try to conceptualize why always bet the 100% but check back the 80 to 90, I'd look at it in kind of a macro sort of way and say, well, I want to have some traps. I want my checkback range to have some traps. But which hand would I rather trap? The 90% equity hand or the 100% equity hand? And the answer is, you know, by trapping, you lose out on a bet and you slow your opponent down when he tries to bet. That's generally the goal of trapping. And 80 to 90% is kind of good enough to slow him down. It's not like we're trying to slow him down from putting in money with two pairs. We just want him not to be able to go crazy with one pair. So an over pair is generally good enough. And throwing a set in there is overkill. And since we do want to build a pot with our good hands, aces will function better as a trap than something like sevens, fours, deuces, because it gives up less as a check back. Same goes for something like a combo draw. So combo draws, while they will mostly bet, they definitely have a check back frequency. Still not the very nutted ones, right? So if we're going to trap draws, might as well bet the ones that it's more important for them to get money with and check the ones where it's less important. So when do we check back sets? So first thing I want to look at here is turns. And I'm going to show you guys several different turns and whether or not we check back sets on them. So something like a jack of diamonds turn, sets are still firmly in the driver's seat with regarding to equity. And so if we look at set, it is literally 0% check back. You never check them back. And you can see that after betting all of your 80 to 90, 90 to 100 equity hands, just bet. And you really need something weaker to consider trapping. And something weaker might be something like pocket tens or a7, but generally weaker. But yeah, let's look at some other turns. So we can look at board pairs. On a board pair, like a 7, you would see quads sometimes checking back, which is a bit of a special hand. And sets that make full houses are, again, generally not really checking back here. They're rare hands. They're super strong. You don't need a hand this strong to trap. You can do it with quads. You can do it with trips sometimes, and again, you can just do it with aces, and aces is a very strong hand, so this is a bit overkill in theory, and of course in practice, all of these traps depend on how aggressive your opponent is and how big he bets once you check back. And so inevitably, against most weaker opponents, there is no need to trap at all, but against some very strong, very aggressive players, it might become attractive despite what you see in the simulation. So that's on a board pairing, but I found a very interesting case to be when draws come in. And when draws come in, one of the interesting things that you'll see happening is, first of all, sets start checking, and just, I don't know, I went into the bet 75 line. I think if you go into bet 75, less draws come in for your opponent on a 5. But let's say we go into the bet 33 line, and this is actually quite important for two reasons. So bet 33 sets will now actually check back 20% of the time, and they will also be not in the top bucket, but in the middle bucket in terms of equity. But yet they're basically no longer the nuts, and not only are they no longer the nuts, but they also are going to have a bunch of turns like a 6 or an 8 or a 3 or a heart where they're worth a significant amount less, especially the 4 straight cards. And so equity drops, less reason to check, to bet, and suddenly you'll see sets mixing in checkbacks on these straightening cards. And whenever you see something like this mix, I would recommend that you think about your opponent, because a mix just means it's close, and an optimal strategy would have a bit of both. But then if your opponent is too aggro versus a check back, then trapping is good. And if he's too passive or bets too small, trapping is bad. And you can often tell based on that which one you prefer. So that's on a straight card. And just to make sure, because I didn't notice the bet 33 before, what you'll see is that when you actually see bet flop smaller, we do start slow playing sets, full houses on the 7 turn. Of course, probably not on a jack turn. Jack turn's still the same, but on the 7 turn, suddenly you do. And a lot of the reason for this has to do with range composition. So if we were to bet flop big, our range is already very polar, and so there is much less need to protect the check back range. Whereas if we bet it small, there's much more need to protect the check back range. So kind of one of the criteria for trapping the turn is that you actually bet the flop small. And another is either that the board paired, and if the board paired, we suddenly have a region of hands that we want to protect. And, if the board paired, boats become a bit special in that they actually want your opponent to improve to hitting a draw or something like that. Now we're going to look at a very different board, but once we examine the turns, and this is generally one of the advantages of examining turns, we can now look at the flop through new eyes, and we already know that if a straight comes in, sets start checking. So what if a straight is there already on the flop? So 7-5-4 two-tone does have a straight on the flop, and immediately we see that the sets start checking back 13%. As opposed to 0 on 7-4 deuce. So with a straight on the board, it's definitely something we can do. If we want to ask ourselves why, the first thing I'd look at is where are sets, and we see that they're in the 80 to 90% equity bucket where aces was before. And I think this is really a major driving factor behind the possibility to check. Like, you're not giving up as much to check. And that's kind of the driving force behind it. Now, interestingly enough, our opponent is actually supposed to lead out 53% of the time, and I'm fairly sure this doesn't happen. So if we kind of jump and go AI solve and ask ourselves more in practice, like, what if our opponent didn't have a leading range? And so sets are probably going to jump even lower down in the equity bucket. So we'll do this. Right, basically click check. And we see that now sets actually check back 42% of the time. And where are they in the equity bucket? Still in the 80 to 90 range, probably just a fair bit lower down in it. So yeah, definitely checking back sets is a thing. And now I'm going to show you guys what do we do on the turn after we check back our set. Yeah, just to walk you guys through what a set that checked back would do on the turn. Let's say the turn is a jack and our opponent fires out a bet. What would we do with our slow played sets? And the answer is almost always raise, right? Like, we slow played, we got a good card, we now put money in. But what if we got one of the million bad cards, like a 6? Of course, here our sets would mostly be calling. And if you get the jack and your opponent checks, now a set is good enough to bet and would just bet. And then the size depends on the bet sizes you're using. Here we have a simulation with multiple sizes, and you can see sets strongly prefer to go into the big one, because basically once the good run out came up, they're trying to catch up to the appropriate pot size that they missed out on. So Yeah, to summarize, I would say checking back sets is a part of GTO strategy. I think that is something to be at least curious about. And that, whenever something is here, it's always a hint, and always you should question, well, if it wasn't there, what would happen? And we can only imagine, if someone never slow plays and when they check back, you get to value bet very thin and bluff a lot and go for very big sizes. And sets checking back are meant to slow that down. Whether it's a set or pocket aces depends on the board texture. But these kind of traps are a part of poker once your opponent becomes aggressive enough, and certainly not necessary against the more passive guys. Yeah, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if there's anything else you'd like me to explore. There is an option for when to slow play sets out of position, and let me tell you, it's a lot more common. And yeah, see you guys next time.